visibly thin audience and quite exhausted, it appears, after yesterday's long day and the morning sessions also. So we are now looking at essentially the security needs and challenges of commercial infrastructure, including healthcare, hospitality and retail sector. I had been asked to speak for 15 minutes, but because we're starting about 10-12 minutes late, so I'll just speak for about 5 minutes and we'll ask the others to give their presentation so that we stay with time. One of the things to understand is that we had a session yesterday afternoon, close in the evening, which I'm sure some of you had attended, that on critical infrastructure protection. So in a way, critical infrastructure protection and the thumb rules that would apply for the security and protection of other infrastructure other than what the government identifies as critical infrastructure, such as the areas of retail, hospitality and healthcare, amongst others, to my mind are also critical in a sense that the rules of protection there would similarly apply as they would apply in the case of critical infrastructure. The only difference being that a critical infrastructure identified by the government, like a power plant or a nuclear power plant or an airport, are seen in the wisdom of the government, and Mr. Mehra will correct me if I'm wrong because he was Secretary Security and I was trying to get him to come and chair the session because he is eminently better placed than me to be able to be associated, because he actually formulated the ground rules for the country in terms of critical infrastructure protection. But as I had a discussion with Mr. Mehra earlier this morning, the thing is that we might not in official jargon call it as critical infrastructure, but they are still critical. Classically, an example being that if a 26/11 type attack took place, say for example in Delhi, nothing stops a well-planned terrorist attack to simultaneously also hit out at healthcare facilities. So when you're trying to move people who are victims of a big attack, say in a railway station, as I highlighted yesterday, which are highly vulnerable with mass number of people moving in and out of it, and as the DGCIS have said, that railway stations are hard to provide protection to. We've just had the presence with us of His Excellency Shri Shekhar Dutt, former Defence Secretary of India, former Governor of Chhattisgarh, who's been kind enough to join us here. Welcome, sir. So I was making a point that essentially what we don't regard as governmental critical infrastructure, or critical infrastructure that is under government control or protection, such as airports and nuclear power plants and normal power plants and some other VA and VPs in military terms, such as the Parliament and such as South Block, North Block and a whole lot of other things. But we tend to overlook and sidestep other infrastructures such as large hospitals, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Apollo, Max hospitals and a whole lot of, Gurgaon now, where I live, has a number of first-class hospitals like Fortis and various other Artemis. Now, those hospitals, if somebody was to plan an attack well, nothing stops him if he extends his imagination to simultaneously create confusion there, so that when attack victims are being taken in that direction, those areas are also seen to be vulnerable, and therefore, where do you go? So I think there is a certain degree of overlap between so-called critical infrastructure as identified by governments and non-critical infrastructure, maybe in governmental parlance, but equally critical if you were to spread the net and attempt to make an impact, since terrorism is all about making impact and news more than anything else, and killing people can make an impact, or making it difficult for killed or wounded people to get to hospital, making an impact. It's all up the scale. what was seen to be earlier just an adventure attack by a small group, today has taken calculated efforts. For example, the attack in Nairobi by Al-Shabaab was clearly very well planned into a well-visited mall complex to convey a message that it's their coming out party, as it were, just as the 26/11 attacks was really the coming out party for Lashkar-e-Toiba on the world stage, ever since Al-Qaeda lost its importance as a fighting outfit, but more only as an ideological hydra-headed monster, and which provides guidance to a whole lot of other terror groups. There were others waiting to step into the wings. And the easiest to do that actually is into the sectors which are important for people but are not well protected. So there's that first point. I think it's important to understand that whatever measures, steps, SOPs you put in, you have to be much more vigorous with the steps that you put in. The second thing is that the government and allied agencies are unable perhaps to provide the resources for the kind of protection that these equally important infrastructural support systems require to provide support in the event, say for instance, a CBRNE attack or a gas plant being attacked, and if the wind direction of the gas plant is not favorable, you could have major parts of Delhi and national decision-making paralyzed, because the chemical vapors that come out of it could have the same. And then when you begin to have that, which hospital do you go to? If simultaneously somebody was to target that, simultaneously one was to target the routes going in that direction, you could have mayhem. So I think it's important to understand the context in which this discussion is going to take place. The other important thing is that in the private agencies that are largely looking after critical infrastructure protection outside the government, such as hospitals, malls, five-star hotels, etc., I'm sure a lot of heads of security here will bear me out when I say that it's going to be almost impossible for you to get your CEOs to come and ever attend a conference like this. Because they just, I can see heads nodding, because they just think that, you know, we've employed you. And I had a friend of mine, my regimental officer, who later went on to command NSG and SSG battalion and outstanding officer from para commandos, later employed by a very, very big real estate company. I don't want to take names, but I suppose you can guess it, as the head of security. But I went to visit him. One day he said, "Sir, you must come there." So I went to visit him with a friend of mine who was the head of security of Canary Wharf in London. As many of you know, I think Canary Wharf has probably more money stashed there than probably most of the world put together, minus the United States. So Richard and I went there, and you know, he made us overlook an area which is about the similar size to Canary Wharf and similarly high profile. But the difference was that when I went to visit Richard in Canary Wharf, which is completely private security that's provided, his control room, and I think Mr. Mehra was also with us, his control room was 3 floors or 4 floors below the ground, nuclear proof, and a completely secure place from which actually to operate his battlefield command in the event all of Canary Wharf faced a Mumbai type attack. And British press had been talking after 26/11 that because it was along the waterway near the Docklands that it could have a marine-based, water-based attack. And all that Richard really was doing, and he said to me a few things. One of them was that, see, I take people with some military experience, but that's not all. I think one issue is I'm a former army officer, and I think many of us, and Brigadier Paul is in the business of trading, and he'll bear me out, that one of the things that you need to do is you have to demilitarize the military mind. It's a big problem because the military is trained to operate in a particular way. Outside in CV Street, I often joke with people that, and the governor himself is a former military man and a decorated soldier, he'll agree with me, that what are seen to be talents in the military and in the battlefield are often seen to be an embarrassment in peacetime. So you have to change the mindset of people and demilitarize them to prepare them for civilian security. But you know, if you have a good sergeant major with you and who can kick butt, you can get the military man to perform far more efficiently than your G4S or whatever other security guard that is there. Because a Fauji just needs to be reminded by a good superior in a few barks at him, कि भूलना मत तुम कहाँ से आए हो, and you know, his zehn and his josh gets the better of him and he's all charged up and the good guy will say, okay, hoy na, and the rest is of course will take care of itself. So I think there is that thing that you need to get the chemistry right with your CEOs, if you are heads of security of a big organization, that sir, you've got to understand that this is not a furgy investment you are making. This is not a superficial effort you are making, but you are actually doing this basically because, as I learned again with Mr. Mehra, I mean 4 years ago in February, we were at a conference in London, and you know, somebody made a very pertinent point. See, big companies like Taj bounce back after 26/11. But what about a small company with 6 employees or 10 employees? They come into that kind of an attack, they can probably never bounce back. And a lot of their life savings are put into that little business. It could be a travel company, it could be a small software house. So I think the responsibility of the state to integrate with private security initiatives is even greater, to ensure a certain degree of comfort and security for the retail business or the hospitality business that somebody is doing, or a small path lab or small outfit where you've got 10-15 employees who are doing good business, but they operate out of one small building in 2 floors. They do your blood test and all kinds of lipid profile and all that. But you know, so many people's livelihood is linked with it. And you might just come in the so-called collateral damage that follows a big attack. You could be just next to the building and which is really being attacked, but because of one reason or the other, you come under also. So I think it's important to understand that you need to have security steps and measures which are not an overkill, but commensurate to what you need. And therefore, there is an element which a lot of companies miss out on. And I would strongly urge you to consider that today and take this home as a lesson, that I think you need to do a risk audit. A lot of companies don't do a risk audit. So what you're doing is, you're going into an overkill, sometimes you're going into an underkill. And even if you have a problem, because you haven't had a risk audit, you're hiding it by sharing it with other companies who have similar interests. Fearing कि मैं बताऊंगा तो my stock and equity in the market will go down because people say यार इनके ऊपर तो हमला हो चुका है. But the fact of the matter is that guy is also being caught on the wrong foot. Only he's not talking about. I give you a classic example of a cyber attack that was faced by, I believe it was Deutsche Bank, and they didn't share it for a long time with other banks, thinking they'd be embarrassed. But other banks would have suffered maybe similar or potentially similar attacks. And because if they were forewarned, they would have been forearmed, you eventually created fertile ground for the attacker to be able to hit out on other targets also. So there is that element also that we need to understand. And finally, 2 or 3 other quick points. Why we spend a fortune on marketing our products, a fortune on positioning our company well. I remember a piece by Santosh Desai, I mean, eminent columnist, and I carry that piece with me still in one of my collections, that you know, after the Bhuj earthquake, a lot of companies donated old clothes or had piles of old clothes put aside worth about 2 lakh rupees, but they spent 20 lakhs spending on adverts and other things, promoting and letting the world know that they were actually doing that good deed. So we do the same mistake in terms of marketing and promoting our brand, that we feel that we need to promote that brand, but we are not spending enough in securing that brand. Because once you are hit and you're caught with your pants down, as it were, or napping, then your brand equity goes down and can never come back. So I always tell people, and I say to big companies and large companies, that 1% of your annual profit must go in for enhancing your security. I know a hotel group like the Oberoi Group that spends 3% of their annual profit for upgrading and upkeep of their buildings, because their core business comes from the state of their buildings. So if the buildings are not in a good, happy, healthy state, they are not going to be in a position to attract more and more customers. I mean, we hear often with a lot of these marketing guys who meet me, oh, you forget that hotel, you know, I mean, it's lived its life. I'm not talking about Oberoi's, but I'm just saying, they just make this remark. Because some of the hotels are just not being able to upgrade because they're too much in demand, or they're just not paying attention to it. But you need to pay for security. And if you make an investment in security, it stays with you for life. I mean, look at it. I mean, countries are not foolish to spend on their armed forces. I mean, Switzerland hasn't had a war for more than 400 years, but it still has a military. So it doesn't mean it's not going to happen to me. It doesn't mean that it's... So I think all the heads of security, good or bad, have to make a strong pitch to their CEOs. Let me remind you, and this is one of the last major points I want to put, that the President of the United States, somebody like Obama, who used to work with the NGO and was semi-academic senator, now spends 2 days every year in his hectic routine with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the security team to understand America's threats and response capabilities. So if Obama is CEO of the United States and quasi-CEO of the world, if he can spend time on security, I'm sure your CEO is not so busy as the President of the United States that he can't give 1 day a year to understand your constraints, your limitations, and how your organization needs to do more in the private sector for protection, particularly of retail, healthcare, and so many other businesses like the hotel industry. You just have to, ensure that they give attention, because when an unfortunate incident happens, I think you'll be held responsible by your organization that you never told us. So at least you should be feel that you have sounded the management about what you have to say. And finally, a point that there is a constraint in terms of the government's laws that private security agencies can't carry weapons, can't carry arms, and they have to be able to protect themselves with a Kalashnikov carrying terrorists by probably blowing a whistle at him and hoping like he'll run away like a dog would, but it doesn't happen that way. What you need to do is create some kind of rules and regulations, and Mr. Shekhar Dutt and Mr. Mehra in the interventions can educate us, that can we look at a set of rules for an auxiliary force outside the CISF, outside the paramilitary forces, who could be armed and equipped at a certain level to provide certain protection as much to our hotels, as much to our hospitals, as India apparently wants to be a healthcare destination. But if your hospitals are not safe, and the guy on the gate doesn't know who's coming or going, and there are melas, every gadi with a blue batti and a siren can walk into the hospital, even if it's guy carrying Hafiz Saeed with his gangsters inside. Because the guy is just going to open the gate and put the trolley out and say, so nobody checks. It's just like the security guard. I mean, if you're well dressed and in a suit and a tie, he'll salute you. You could be the cousin of whoever, Zikrul Rahman Lakwi or whoever. He'll salute you. He's a sadhana guy, So, I mean, as one superior in the army once taught me, that he says he was trained to, suspect even his father. So, jab tak aap shak nahi karoge, then you can't have foolproof security. So you have to constantly raise the barrier, constantly challenge. And I think with that, let me invite, we've got a distinguished panel, and let me invite Mr. P. Shivakumar, CEO and VP Operations and Finance of Apollo Hospitals. I believe Mr. Shivakumar has to run, so he would be the first person to speak. Then Colonel Sunil Khurana, Head of Administration and GM HR, Hero Motor Corp, and Captain Shakil Ahmed, who I believe would from time to time take charge of the session if I need to run away a bit early. And we have Colonel Rajiv Pasi and Mr. Jitendra Kumar Singh and Gordon. So we request you all to please come in, and I think it would be a good idea if all of you give us at least 5 to 7 minutes in bullet points, the big picture, that what your take on it is, and then we go into a Q&A and a bit of a debate. So if that's okay with you, then we'll do that. That will be a lot better. Then if you've got a full 5-page presentation your secretary has made, spare us that. Okay. So if you can speak in bullet points, please come on to this. Nobody is worried really what you're paying your security guards. I repeat a phrase I said yesterday: you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Mr. Sivakumar, please.